morning. Welcome to Zeta Live and our panel, Identity in Motion, First-Party Data, AI, and the Future of Customer Engagement. My name is David Wells. I'm an industry principal in the media and advertising practice at Snowflake. Wow, thank you. I feel good about myself now. We have a very distinguished list of panelists. I want to introduce them. We have Ingmar Zak, President, Data Solutions of WPP Choreograph. We'll get some more hooting and hollering if you can. We have Melinda McBride, SVP Partnerships, GM Data-Driven Marketing.
All right.
Woo. And lastly, although not leastly, Matt Keiser, Chief Addressability Officer at Zeta Global. Wow. Love it. A lot of energy in this room. Wonderful. Maybe the place to start, I obviously introduced the panelists and their titles, but maybe we start with you, Ingmar. If you could tell the audience a little bit about your purview at WPP Choreograph, I think that's a place to start.
Okay, great. So I joined WPP Media Choreograph 4 months ago. I have a long career in advertising technology. For me, it's the first time on the agency side. And right now, I'm looking after our data solutions portfolio, which includes Open Intelligence, our own AI foundational model, Resolve, our own federated learning technology, data products, which includes, in the US, our own national consumer database, our identity assets, and I'm also working on the technology stack for our media solutions business.
Wonderful. Melinda, be so kind.
I don't feel like my list is that long. So I'm Melinda McBride. I serve as the GM for our data-driven marketing business at Equifax, mostly focused on acquisition solutions in financial services. I've been at Equifax about 9 years, but have been in the data analytics and technology space for, I don't know, I don't want to say the number of years, but 25 plus at this point. A lot of it very much focused on marketing analytics and driving outcomes within the marketing ecosystem.
Matt.
Howdy, Matt Keiser, Chief Addressability Officer, Zeta Global, former CEO of Live Intent. Interestingly, my mandate's actually pretty straightforward. Help brands and publishers win outside of the walled gardens by turning visits into known relationships into outcomes, of course, into insights and answers, and knowledge that we feed back into the system, helping publishers prove the value of their content, and of course, making it easy for advertisers to trust and marketers, the actual advertising they're doing.
That's a perfect segue. So Ingmar, maybe we start with you. The topic of the panel really is how marketers and publishers are vying with walled gardens to power data-driven activation as well as measurement. Can you talk a little bit about the approach at WPP Choreograph, what you're doing there to drive, scale of activation as well as validation of that activation through measurement, whether it's including ID-based activation or ID-less-based activation?
Okay, great. So let me quickly explain what Open Intelligence is. It's technically our flagship AI product. The last couple of months, we have built an own foundational AI model that is trained on WPP's own data, panel data, survey data, data that we own. And it's also based on data that we have licensed from commercial data providers. But this data model in itself is global, but it's generic. It's not specific to an advertiser or a specific supply-side partner. And in order to make this valuable for us is we need to train it on the data that our publishing and media owner partners have available. And additionally, we also need to train it on the data that we get from our advertising partners. As you can imagine is, if you're an advertiser, you don't want to give your agency your first-party data so they can train the AI model on it. And that's the reason why we have acquired InfoSum a couple of months ago, because it enables us to train for our advertisers a custom model on the first-party data of our advertisers without moving the data of the advertiser out of their own cloud environment. So InfoSum can now run in the partner's own cloud environment, and there we do training on the intelligence data or the aggregated data of our partners. We do the same on the publisher media owner side. It's a little bit different. We don't need custom models there because our media partners and publishing partners have an interest that we have a better understanding of the supply landscape and what their users are doing, so that this intelligence becomes part of our own planning and discovery tools when we are planning media campaigns. And I think that's a little bit leveling the playing field on the publisher side, because right now it's so much easier for an agency to activate in the walled garden because you have 100% addressability, and smaller publishers or the open web is at a disadvantage because you have less addressability. But through our federated learning model, now everything is the same for us. We can do holistic planning across all supply pools, which is better for our advertisers because now we can target the audience that we want when we want to target them, rather than going to the walled gardens because it's just easier for us.
That's perfect, and it's also a great segue to Melinda. Talk a little bit about data-driven activation or measurement from the data provider's perspective or identity provider's perspective. Obviously, you have a long history in data-driven marketing. It's part of your title. It seems like for a long time, data was used at the point of activation. However, a lot of that use, whether data products or services, is actually moving upstream into the cloud, whether you're working with someone like Ingmar or a marketer in and of itself, an advertiser in and of itself. Talk a little bit about what you're doing and what the trends are that you're seeing.
Yeah, and I think it's a very different world that we're living in. Obviously, we're sitting here at a real convergence of data, technology, artificial intelligence. We can't go a day in the news cycle without hearing innovations on that front. I think from my perspective, Equifax is a data company, and that is our purview in the ecosystem. We have regulated data, which is the credit data, and we work with non-regulated data, which a lot of it is used for the marketing ecosystem. And I think the big difference here that we need to be cognizant of is around data quality.
Sure.
As we think about large language models, artificial intelligence, having a good, strong data quality, both on the first party and third party side, is super important for the reasons you just mentioned, right? So when we think about data and data quality, we need to, at least from the Equifax perspective, we think about it as verified, authentic, authenticated data that is full of trust. Mm-hmm. And I think that's super important for the reason you just mentioned. Traditionally, folks like us, our data has been part of the activation segment of the flow of the value chain. But increasingly what we see is third-party data like ours is being moved up in the funnel to be paired with first-party data to drive outcomes and drive some of the models and the learnings that are being used. And so as we think about that, data quality is just super important because, one, if we're using it at the top of the funnel, that is our outcome. And if we have low quality data driving those models, it's always been bad, right?
Right.
But increasingly, especially with artificial intelligence, the multiplier effect of a bad signal gets even worse as the model continues to train. So that's really one area of focus that we are working with providers and our partners on, is being that single source of good, authentic data.
That's super helpful. So I'm a marketer, I'm focusing more on first-party data, and I want to activate that, and I want to measure the outcomes, but I need to make sure it's clean and that it's resolved to an individual or household. I want to enrich it, I want to segment, and then activate. And if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. So that's where you're playing a crucial role, is that foundational layer with very large marketers. Yeah. Mr. Keiser, data, identity, it's not only limited to brands and advertisers, it's also an issue with large publishers. Can you speak a little bit about how that comes into play in your patch and what you're seeing in terms of trends in the industry? Sure.
Look, the world's changing, right? Generative AI is making it so that there's less search traffic. Every visit is therefore more important than it's ever been. And what we're finding is generative engine optimization may be able to help you get a visit, but it's actually identity that turns that visit into a relationship. One without the other, and you're going to fail. So interestingly, and this may be counterintuitive, but I believe that what we're going to see is actually a real change, that agents are going to start to actually carry the first-party data, and they're going to actually generate passkeys on behalf of individuals. And as they're able to bring you, do the comparison shopping for you, or come back to you and say, in order to, get this, data that you need to share either a passkey or your first-party data, or pay something. And in the end, I think we're going to see first sort of a decrease maybe in data flowing to publishers, but over time, I think consumers will actually give agents even more of a yes to actually share that data to get back what they need because the comparison shopping will be done. So I think it's a really interesting time. I think we're going to see a big change in publishing, but in the end, I think it's the publisher and this high quality content that's actually going to drive generative engine optimization and sort of this agentic connection of passkeys data, first party data, which of course is where we're very focused. How do we bring that data back into Zeta? How do we make it actionable? And of course, combine it with both the first party data of our clients as well as validated, authenticated third party data.
That's great, thank you. Ingmar, let's come back to you. You had talked a little bit about a DCR that you acquired and using that DCR to train models and then activate federated learning. Can you talk generally to this audience about DCRs in general? And we're seeing widespread adoption of them, but what do we need to do to scale greater use of DCRs, whether we're talking about accessibility to people who are non-technical or interoperability of various DCRs? Can you speak to that topic?
Yeah, I think the use cases are changing right now a little bit. So when DCRs came up, it was like an advertiser wanted to push their first-party data to the publisher side, and you needed a data clean room for matching. But that's very inefficient to do the matching between publisher and advertiser because we have naturally falling match rates, even in the US where you can still use a lot of identity data, which is an industry challenge because you're then trying to focus on a smaller and smaller pool of people you can re-identify or identify. So what we are doing is, like from an InfoSum perspective, it's now taking more a data collaboration platform. So a lot of our partners, especially advertisers, they have first-party data, but it's incomplete. So maybe you have only a certain amount of hashed emails or combination of hashed emails and mobile ad IDs. You maybe do not know all the other data features or attributes like gender, age group, and so on. So what we're doing with InfoSum is we have a lot of data partners in the platform, and you can totally, for money, enrich your own first-party data set. So it becomes complete. And then we will combine this with our own AI approaches. Now you have a complete data set. Now we can train an AI model on your better first-party data, and we will use the AI model in itself to execute media planning, media activation, and also measurement. So there's no longer a need to match the advertiser's first-party data with the publisher's first-party data. And I think this was the challenge when data clean rooms came up. There was a land grab. Some party had like vendor A and vendor B, and then they couldn't match the data, and everyone felt like I need to now license data clean rooms from everyone. I think that's no longer the case. For us, it's important that our advertisers use our data clean room, obviously, and can use it to enrich their own first-party data. Our vision is a little bit like, rather than transporting any kind of first-party data as key value pairs in the transaction, we want to upgrade this to AI embeddings, because that way it becomes privacy safe and data safe from the get-go. And I think this will totally change the purpose of the data clean room. Yeah, it's more about data collaboration, less about matching data between publishers and advertisers.
That is super interesting to me. I mean, I totally agree with you. Once upon a time, identity was sitting in the middle to match, say, a marketer's data with the universe of a large ad platform, and that was qualifying who was targeted with an ad and how you would measure. But now you're taking a more data-driven approach, and some might say privacy-compliant approach, where it's really enriching that first-party data, plugging those gaps, and then training the model and deploying the model that governs the way that media is purchased, as well as the way that you're measuring the outcomes of it. That's pretty powerful stuff. Melinda, if you would talk about DCRs yourself, obviously the world is changing in terms of DCRs and AI. Talk a little bit about the implementation of your data products and services. I mean, there are different ways to do it. You can do it through applications. You can do it through DCRs.
Right. And so, it's really been a journey for us. And I think, we see a lot of drivers towards data clean rooms, right? There are changing consumer privacy laws. There are changes at the big tech company stacks. And then general, for brands, their first-party data is highly proprietary, and they don't want to share it outside of their walls, and they want to protect that data. as well, they don't want to bring other external data into their walls. And so data clean rooms, of course, foundationally for us started as a way to exchange data, and even I would say generation one for us was to deliver data to our customers and partners in an efficient way. But it's really evolving, and just as Ingmar was saying about identity and matching in those environments and being able to collaborate more closely. And the outcome for marketers has been better targeting, as I would say for us, the first iteration. But I think it will continue to evolve, at least for us in our partnership. We've been a longtime partner of Snowflake. What we're seeing is that it's going to move beyond just that targeting into measurability, where I can bring exposure data and outcome data together and then get a better learning, and then just continue that learning loop and cycle in a much more efficient and impactful way.
Yeah, we're seeing that today too, where some of the large platforms that have metadata actually in our platform are pairing that alongside a data and identity provider, and then they can interpret some of that metadata through the lens of that data and identity provider and put an agent on top of it so that they can solicit suggestions on ways to optimize that campaign. Do I layer in some additional demography? Do I move some of that spend from this geo to this other geo? Do I change channels a little? So we're seeing that as well. So that's great to validate from your perspective as well. Matt, so addressability, DCRs, I mean, that's where we saw the rise of DCRs, really, is there were marketers who wanted to match against the subscriber universe, particularly with the streamers. They wanted to do so in such a way where they were not exposing sensitive information. All of a sudden, you could do that join without movement of data or exposure of that information. You put identity in the middle of it to scale the match, and that would power activation. Then on the inverse, you would also pull in those logs and resolve them to an outcome and validate that investment so that you were able to optimize or measure that campaign activation. Talk a little bit, I mean, you painted a very grandiose vision of AI. Talk about DCRs, AI, and where those two might intersect, if you can.
I think what I'm seeing is it's really successful use cases. It's outcomes, of course, that are driving adoption. So, an example would be Hero, which is our addressability solution for the web, is now in beta for CTV and for app. And what we're seeing is a lot of publishers, SSPs, and of course brands that are all interested in, how do they share their data? How does a brand, a publisher, and an agency maybe all combine data? And get the match rates that are going to rival the walled gardens. We do that using our super graph, right? Identity really is, the connective tissue. Email, first-party data, the linchpin, and CRM, the workhorse for a publisher. And when you bring them all together and you make it easy, so the interoperability, I think, is the other big stress point that's becoming easier and easier. But it's really these outcomes. So the more that you can show that you can actually, drive CPMs, that you can make it actually safe to buy, what you end up with is adoption. So, for me, I think, again, continued usage along with, proven outcomes that allow brands and publishers to be successful is what's really going to drive us forward. Technically, I'd probably leave it to you and Ingmar to say what's really important.
That's great. So, I mean, a lot of this is very daunting, right? Even if you've worked in our industry, for many, many years, it's moving so quickly. DCRs, the advent of DCRs was not very long ago. Then you talk about AI and the implications on all manner of media and advertising use cases. If you're a publisher or a marketer, any words of advice on how you get started from someone who's sort of leading the charge at one of the largest holding companies in the world?
I think we need some standards. It will be very hard for individual agencies to negotiate with thousands of publishers. Sure. Yeah, we have seen some open standards, I think, that are coming up that we still considering if we want to support them. I think everyone wants to get closer to the publisher, ideally as close as possible to the ad server. So my expectation is the role of DSPs and SSPs will change. I think it's good for agencies, and what's good for agencies is good for advertisers and marketers. and it will be good for publishers. Yeah,
Right.
and I think the ad text that is in the middle could be reused either into marketing dollars or probably it's very good for publishers. And with the use of AI, I think the super advantage that a walled garden has today might be a little bit lower in the future. So I think maybe also some media dollars will be reallocated from the top-heavy, large walled gardens to the mid-tail, which I think is probably also good, I think, for agency land.
That's very well said. I saw Matt give a fist bump on the edge where talking about DSPs and SSPs and how they might change. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing I'll say about AI is, there are some large walled gardens that say, you know what, tell us your KPIs and write us a check and we'll get there. When I think about that, that's handing over a lot of trust, and people still want, some view into what's working under the hood. I guess a question to you, Melinda, or to you, Ingmar, or you, Matt, is like, how much is going to get handed over that we sort of let AI take, and you're training the model, so you have a high degree of confidence in what you're doing. But if you're a marketer who's not as close as you are to the model, how much do you think these marketers are going to hand over to AI and power that decisioning, and how much are they going to want to stay involved and have some level of transparency in terms of those agents?
I think for agencies, and I'm new to on the agency
Sure.
side, so I probably would have said something different 6 months ago, is like, the only real important partner for us is the advertiser.
Mm-hmm.
We are not a publisher, so there's no conflict of interest. If you look at the vast majority of walled gardens are media owners and publishers and AI companies and cloud companies. So if you're an advertiser, you need to find out if you're handing over, putting your trust into someone who is the publisher and you are the advertiser, there's a conflict of interest.
Right.
I think that's very important that you make this assessment. And if you're an agency and you're not a publisher, I think that's the first step to trusting us. But there needs to be transparency how the model is being built. Mm-hmm. I think we have a good approach that we never want to touch the first-party raw data of our clients.
Sure.
We want to train it at particularly arm's length, and we will have custom models available that are not commingling data across partners. I think that's important. I think time will tell how fast advertisers can take skill up themselves. So we've seen that very large advertisers hiring AI talents themselves. For the mid-tails, probably a bit harder to find the right AI talent to make the assessment themselves. But I think over time, everyone will employ AI experts in-house so that they can check what the agency of record is doing.
That's great. Melinda, from your perspective, I mean, obviously, you're talking to marketers every day. Part of your title is data-driven marketing. You're the key component of the foundational layer of that first-party data, making sure it's cleansed and corrected, making sure it's resolved to a key, enriched, and then activated. When you talk to them and you speak to them about what they're trying to accomplish, obviously I think a lot of CMOs want to leverage AI to their advantage to hold on to their job. But when you interact with them and they're thinking about AI and training models and using that around things like data-driven activation, measurement of outcomes, personalization on owned media, what's your advice to them?
I think it's still about the outcome, right?
Sure.
I mean, because we work in the data world, and unfortunately for us, the outcome is the driver. And so it's about all the things that we've discussed today on the panel. It's about having strong foundations in data quality, training the models with good data, and having a very good target about what your outcome is. And I think as long as we continue to stay in those lines and focus on getting the outcome and the ROI, we're focused on the right things. I would say that in general, we are pretty prescriptive about the use of AI.
Sure.
Part of our business is a heavily regulated part of the industry. Others are not as regulated. So we have to be very intentional about how we're looking at AI and how we can show the outcome is not biased and those kind of things. So that's really been the focus for us. And again, I think it starts with all those foundations, clean first-party data, which is harder than it sounds a lot of times, right? Brands have more data at their disposal than ever, given digital transformation in the last 5 to 6 years. But still, we work with a lot of clients who have a real challenge around that. They have a ton of integrations. They're bringing a lot of different customer data together. So clean data, good data quality for the third party, and then training the model for the right outcomes. I think as long as we continue to do that, we will deliver on the ROI and the promise.
Okay, that's great. And then Matt, let's finish with you. You talked about agents interacting with visitors to publisher websites and handing over information, or at least having an interaction with an agent to personalize that experience or have the visit that they want. Are you able to expand on that, your philosophy or your vision around AI agents, whether that's a consumer interaction or agent-to-agent interaction in terms of monetization of that inventory to support things like curation? We'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Interestingly, advertising was historically, right, prospecting to the unknown. Marketing was marketing to the known. And yet, with an identity-first world, right, no matter what, you're now using identity and data to reach people. And funnels are coming together, and it's only that much more difficult, right, for marketers to reach customers wherever they're spending time and they're active. So generative AI with a man in the middle, is extremely important for creating efficiency. And we have historically we've had a marketing cloud, we've had a data cloud, now we have a publisher cloud, and I don't think I've actually said it yet, but closing the loop and being able to actually round trip the data, authenticate the data, and help a publisher and a brand, right, bring their first party data, increase those match rates, as you point out, by using a super graph like Zeta's to get those match rates, but also the verified data that's available only from third parties is critical. And as it becomes more and more complex, we need more and more help. And I think news in the industry, right? There's going to be another wrapper. There's always one more challenge. There's one more social network. So yeah, I think generative AI is a huge step forward. It needs to be managed. And at the end of the day, it's going to help us really turn insights into knowledge, and knowledge is going to be what lifts all boats for publishers and advertisers everywhere, not just the walled gardens.
That's great. Well, that's our time on this panel, Identity in Motion. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would be so kind, maybe a round of applause for these industry leaders.
Good job. Good job.
We nailed it.
Right on time.
Thank you so much.